Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the CryptoLabs YouTube channel. My name is Colin, and today I'm going to be kind of walking through a situation I'm in directly right now and just talk about a thought process because I get this question all of the time, either in my accelerator group, the group coaching program I run, or just in the UIG. It's when should I rebalance? Should I rebalance? I'm out of range. What should I do? Should I do that? Should I do this? And the question is really hard to answer because it really depends on quite a few things. And I wanted to do in this video, I wanted to walk through, hey, what am I seeing right now? And this is a position I'm currently in at this very moment. And I'm going through this thought process myself of, hey, what should I do right now? And I figured, hey, why not record this video and walk through exactly what I'm seeing and how I think about assessing and taking action on this type of move. Okay. First, before we dive in, just make sure you like and subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff for us. It really helps us get this message out to more people. And obviously, we want to just serve you. So just like and subscribe, support us in that way, and let's rock and roll. So this is a wrapped ETH spec pool. So wrapped ETH, ETH and spec, CryptoLabs. I'm really liking these two projects right now, and I'm currently in a pool that's, I believe, let's check that really quick here. I think it's a 14% wide range. If it would help if I click the right button here. Here we go. Price range. I believe it's about 14% wide. Yeah, about 14% wide is the range that I'm in. And I'm starting to think about how should I manage this pool because I'm currently out of range. So I'm not earning fees. Now, for me, this is more of a cash flow play as opposed to setting myself up for massive price appreciation. So if I were to talk about that really quick, if I were to be in this pool because I really like these two assets and I want them, to be correlated and I want them to soak up as much price appreciation as I would want them to, well, I wouldn't do a 14% wide range. I would go a much wider range. Reason being is because this price action is going to move, especially with CryptoLabs being a small market cap. By market cap, it's a small token, a small project. It's going to be volatile. It's going to be moving up really quickly. It's going to be moving down real quickly, and it's been decently correlated to decently correlated to wrapped ETH. But as you can see in my chart here, it moves kind of drastically. Especially look at this massive run, and just in coordination of the chart here, this downward means that spec is increasing in value. It is outperforming wrapped ETH, right? And so this huge downward movement means that spec has gone up in value. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And so for me, I'm like, well, two things. I could widen my ranges a bunch, right? That would do two things. That would keep me in range so I can just continue to earn fees. And it would help me as things move up in value, it would keep me in range so I can have exposure to those assets. So I could widen this out to 40, 50% wide, kind of sacrifice the short-term cash flow in hopes that those two assets massively appreciate in value. I could do that for sure. But for me, this is more of a cash flow play for me. And what I mean by that is I'm willing to do a little bit tighter of a range because that will increase my return percentage in terms of cash flow. And then I'm using that cash flow to build my bull run bag. Right now I'm building up AVAX, Sol, and Render. Those are the three assets I'm mostly focusing on in terms of building my bull run bag. Okay. So now I'm thinking, okay, if this is a cash flow play right here, well, and I'm out of range. Currently, it's not working for me. Now, I made a post in the UIG because I saw spec run up in value and it shot me right out of range and went all the way down here. So top of my range is 330, bottom of my range is 287, and this thing ran all the way down. Look at down here to 256. And I said, you know what? Colin of old, Colin of years ago would have rebounced right away, and now I would have had a new range all the way down here, and I would have done a 50-50 split with a new tight range down here, right? But the downside to that is I'm locking in a bunch of impermanent loss. Colin, what do you mean? Talk about that. Yeah, definitely. So impermanent loss, right, is the difference between what the value of the pool is worth compared to what it could have been worth if it was just held in these assets. So a really easy way to see this is that if spec runs up in price and spec goes from $8 to $10 and it pushes me out of range. Well, once I go out of range, all of my spec tokens gets converted into wrapped ETH. So the other day when this went out of range to the downside in my range here, I got fully converted 100% into ETH. Now I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with that, but I'm not earning fees, so I'm not super okay with that. However, as the thing ran all the way down, I wanted to wait just a couple of days. Now I know this requires a little bit of patience, but it's sometimes it's necessary, is I wanted to see what happens. I wanted to see if spec would come back, because when spec moves up so drastically like that, generally what we see is a nice retraction. We see it go all the way up and then we see it kind of quickly come down. And I wanted to see how fast spec would move back down pretty much, right? Because I didn't want to rebalance. I didn't want to lock in the permanent loss. And so I waited. So boom, spec ran up in price, sent me out of range, and then it consolidated here for a little bit, and then spec moved down back in price. And when I woke up, I think it was yesterday, I woke up yesterday and I said, huh, I'm back in range, right? Good thing I didn't rebalance, because rebalancing would have been taking that wrapped ETH and buying back more spec at a higher price and getting back in the pool. Now with spec, so if I'm buying spec at $10 and then spec comes back down to 8, let's say, well, I traded my wrapped ETH, I swapped it for spec at 10, and then it comes back down to 8. Now the value of my pool is going to be worth less than if I were to have just waited, hence locking in the impermanent loss there. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I don't do a great job of explaining it, but hopefully that came across well, right? And so for me, waiting just 24, I think it was a little bit over, I think it was about 48 hours, but I waited about 48 hours and bam, I was back in range earning fees again at that 250% clip. And I said, well, all is well and good, right? I'm still back in range. And you can see since I've been in this pool down here, it's popped out of range a few times, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 times it's popped out of range. But you'll notice that because of the range that I've set, it's come back into my range rather quickly. And so I guess the moral of the story here is don't panic, don't rush to rebalance, because that I've seen over long term, the constant rebalancing will diminish the pool value. Even though you're on range the whole time and you're earning fees, the fees generally don't outpace the impermanent loss you're locking in by doing that, the pool value diminishing. Okay, so just patience, patience. Okay, but now it's like, okay, Colin, what am I doing here? So spec ran up out of range, it's come back into range, but now look at where it's at. It's sitting just outside of my range at about 280, right? And it bounced all the way back down here to 273, and now it's sitting at 280 again. So let's walk through my thought process now. Couple things that I could do. Number one is I could wait. I could continue to wait, right? And if spec moves back down, right, or wrapped ETH comes back up, right, it could drive the price back into my range, right? If it comes back into my range, then I'm back earning fees. Everything is good, right? So that's number one. I could wait. How long do I want to wait though, right? If I'm out of range for an extended period of time, then it's not really satisfying my goal for this pool, which is to help me cash flow and build my bull run bag. Traditionally rebalancing. So what I could do is I could move my range. I could take, let's create new ranges here. So what I could do is I can go much wider in a traditional rebalance. So I can toss my bottom of my new range down here on the bottom, and I can traditionally rebalance, and I can keep my top where it is and just have a much wider range. I could certainly do that. I could find what else, excuse me, like what looks like another little bit of support. Maybe if I wanted to keep my range a little bit tighter, I could do it like that. Or potentially what I could do is I could snuggle rebalance, and what a snuggle rebalance is. It's similar to a traditional rebalance, but a traditional rebalance is when we take one asset and swap it for the other. So my example with that wrapped ETH is taking that wrapped ETH, swapping it for spec, and getting back in the pool. That's a traditional rebalance, and that generally happens when the range, or excuse me, when the current price is inside of the range, right? Because the ratio of the assets, I would need wrapped ETH and spec to be able to create that position. So that's a traditional rebalance. What I'm suggesting, or what I'm thinking about doing, is doing a little bit of a snuggle rebalance. Now, a snuggle rebalance is creating a brand new position. So that means I would have to remove my liquidity, get back in at a new range, but without swapping assets. The swapping of the assets directly locks in permanent loss. And so I don't want to do that. What if I just extended the bottom of my range directly above the current price? And by doing that, I would have widened my range a little bit from 14 to 16%, roughly. So if it goes back in a range, I'd be earning slightly less rewards, right? As opposed to waiting until it gets back up to my original range. So that's something to think about. But this promotes it getting back into range a little bit faster. So if spec just drops just a hair, or wrapped ETH increases by just a hair, I would be back in range earning fees again. Now, Downside to a snuggle rebalance is there's still impermanent loss involved. There's still impermanent loss involved because now if SPEC were to drop a little bit, that SPEC would be converted into wrapped ETH at a different price. Flip that. My wrapped ETH would be converted into SPEC at a higher price than it would have if I just left it where it is at 287, right? So it's another thing that you want to consider. See, this is where it's hard when someone asks me, "Hey, should I rebalance?" It's like, man, there's a dozen things that we need to think through here. It's not as simple as yes, rebalance or snuggle, yes, snuggle or wait, right? And so hopefully this is bringing you some value today of like, yeah, these are a lot of things we got to look at. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is because of this two bounces that it's done, it's bounced off support here, it's bounced off support here, and now it's sitting here. That gives me a good indication that this does still look like it would be a good range. Now, if I saw, lower lows here and we were going like this, well, then that's not necessarily great for providing liquidity because that means I'm just sort of chasing the price down. But because I've seen two bounces here, that gives me a good indication that wrapped ETH and SPEC are still decently correlated, that these two assets haven't completely decoupled, right? So I guess what I'm thinking about doing is doing two things, and I haven't decided yet, but I was hoping talking through this on the video, it helped me make a decision. Number one is snuggle rebalance and just widening my range a little bit because I want to promote this asset to come to the current price to come back into my range just a hair so I start earning rewards again. Right? That's number one. I'm really considering that. And then number two is doing a traditional rebalance, but only with a little bit, right? I'm not doing a massive traditional rebalance down here. And I want to keep my top range where it is, right? Now, I could bring it down just a hair because there's been quite a few resistance points up here. So I could bring it down a little bit. But for me, I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it right here at 330. Excuse me, a little bit higher. You get the point, about 330. And then the second option, I was thinking about was doing a traditional rebalance, but not bringing it all the way bit down here, but maybe just right here or right here, right? Maybe 276 or maybe 273. Reason why I would do that is, well, it is a traditional rebalance. So I am technically swapping wrapped ETH for SPEC. So I'm locking in a little bit of permanent loss there. But I did want to widen the range a little bit, right? I do want to widen the range potentially from 16 down to about 20, maybe 21% wide range, which is still a really solid range. So again, when we zoom out a little bit and we look at this chart, this new range at 20, maybe 21% wide does capture a lot of the trading action here. And I do believe that it would stay inside this range for quite some time here. Now, SPEC could make another big run. It could go from $9 up to $10, $11, $12. And if that's the case, and if ETH doesn't move with it, we might see it come down in range. But again, the two things that I'm seeing is a bounce off support here, a bounce off support here, and now it's sitting at 280. That gives me a good indication that this still looks like a decent range here, as opposed to if it was putting in a series of lower lows and moving quickly down here. If it was making action like this, then that's something different to consider. But for me, it's keeping a nice solid sideways range here. And so that's why I'm thinking about doing either one of those things. Number one, snuggle rebalance, or number two, a short traditional rebalance here. So hopefully I know this video is getting long, but hopefully it brought you some value today. Again, that's why it's so challenging for me to answer rebalance or wait or snuggle, whatever it might be. It's so challenging for me just to give you an answer. We got to talk through it, especially when it comes to, hey, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Et cetera, et cetera. So again, hopefully this brought you some value today. Hop in the UIG, ask your questions if you got it. In the YouTube comments, make sure you ask your questions down there too. Would love to support you best I can. And with that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, and get ready for the next one. We'll talk soon. Peace.